Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Write Pack. Welcome back to Write Pack Radio. This is your host, David Allen Lucas, author of crime drama and science fiction. And with me today is...
my name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator.
Brad R. Cook. I am a steampunk author. Iron Horseman is out there. Please snatch it up. And Iron Zulu is coming soon. So pre-order.
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis, and I'm president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime, which is a mystery writers organization. And no, we're not sexist. We have misters as well as sisters.
So you're not just nuns that have gone bad.
Not at all.
I'm Melanie Okolani, a writer of nonfiction, science fiction, and fantasy.
And today's topic is...
Yes. Why are there no bathroom breaks in fiction?
What? Wait a minute, Captain. A poop question? Can't I talk about the warp nacelles or something? They're going to think I'm a sanitation engineer, not a warp engineer.
You're not a sanitation engineer?
There you go. See? There, I'm stuck.
Hooray!
Fine then. We shall talk about the what makes for the practical protagonist.
Thank you. Okay, so I had to do the homage to Star Trek Enterprise. With Trip gets that question from kids to answer.
And
so,
scene.
Okay, so writing practical fiction. Why don't we write about bathroom breaks and going to grab the beer out of the go for it, beer out of the refrigerator? Just for the audience, I had suddenly everyone had their hand up ready to talk. So we begin.
Well, people do grab beers out of the refrigerator, and often in fiction.
Yes.
But I will give you the absolute nth degree of explanation, and it comes straight from Elmore Leonard. He tries not to write things that people don't want to read, that people skip over. And we don't want to hear about all of those boring things, and we quit reading if they were in there, and that's the bottom line.
Thank you again. Good night.
And now tune in next week. No, go ahead.
Yes, mic drop. We all walk away now. That's it. Actually, I was going to throw out exactly that. Yes, The Sims is out there, and if you want to write about people doing mundane things, The Sims is definitely, or not write, but play things. Play people doing mundane things. The Sims is there.
If you want to participate in other people's bodily functions,
there you go.
Can play The Sims.
Exactly. But what I was going to say is the reason we don't do this is because, exactly as you were saying, no one would read them. But more importantly than that, I actually think it's kind of cool when the writer figures out a way to showcase this in some way. Either having the scene take place as the guy steps out of the bathroom or something along those lines, just so you can get that tweak in there. But if you notice, no starships ever have bathrooms.
If you look on the blueprints for the Enterprise, you can see that there's one on the bridge.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's one in each quarter. But actually, I'm going to disagree with you. There's one starship where the bathroom is shown frequently and even has a great scene in it. But actually, they used the bathroom as part of it. And that was Battlestar Galactica, the reboot.
Yes.
And the scene in which I'm talking about most importantly is Baltar, who is the known bad guy, which, by the way, he's the only one with an English accent. Come on, why?
He trained himself to do it.
I know.
He comes from Aries, whatever, the Aries one, where they all talk like Cockney, Welsh, British concoction things, and he thought they all sounded garish, so he turned himself into a Londoner for no good reason.
But anyway, so he's been accused of destroying the human race, which technically is true. He was part of it. And he's in the bathroom. He's tracked down the guy who... my mind just went blank.
Yeah?
He's got a great voice, too. This guy sings.
Gata?
Gata, thank you. And they're in stalls next to each other, and he's trying to get Gata to let him in to be able to adjust the data and make sure it doesn't come up as him. But it's
let him into the system, not into the stall with him.
Exactly. Exactly.
That would have been a very different story.
It would have been. But that whole scene.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, we should probably clarify, showers don't count. I can't even count the number of shower scenes that there are in fiction and everything like that. But what we're really talking about are the truly mundane things, like going to the bathroom or shaving or
putting in contact lenses.
Yeah, putting your contact lenses in.
In fiction, people either wear glasses or they have perfect vision. No one wears contacts.
Kicking off your shoes, weird things like this. They might be a small action, but an entire scene dedicated to them would be strange.
Yeah, unless it's significant to the plot, which is the
bingo.
The key there is that you're supposed to include things that we're supposed to notice. So as readers, if it's important for us to notice that he's brushing his teeth because he's got obsessive compulsive disorder or something, or if it's important for us to notice that she took her shoes off because the lack of shoes is going to come to play later, then you bring those things up. If it's important to note that he hasn't been to the bathroom all day because later going to the bathroom is going to be a real issue that'll be a problem for him as he's trying to hide from ninjas in his apartment, then you're playing Heavy Rain, and it's an issue there. I'm transitioning into that because Heavy Rain, which is a video game created for the PlayStation 3, you have the opportunity to pee in every single bathroom in that game.
Yes.
If you're playing your character, you can walk up to a toilet and you will use it. And you will watch with a long time and listen to all the sounds, and David Cage included every second of that. And he is criticized for it because that's ridiculous and unnecessary and probably feeds someone's fetish somewhere.
Probably.
I thought that would be important to note, that some people do include going to the bathroom in their stories. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's a visual medium that he's using. But, it is not unheard of to include bathroom breaks in your fiction.
And before I turn this over to Fedora, I was going to say, I just thought everyone ran around like a good private investigator or a cop on surveillance. In real life, they use wide neck 2-liter bottles. But go ahead.
Now, let's see that happen.
Wow.
Not you, David Cage. Don't put that in your next thing.
Well, it does happen fairly often, actually, in various kinds of suspense things, because it's a closed-off place, and whoever the victim, or whatever you want to call it, the interrogating person, is trapped there and has no place to go, so a private eye or a cop might well beard them in the bathroom and make them say things they wouldn't say otherwise.
I always look up when I'm sitting in a stall.
Just in case Spider-Man's there?
Or somebody's looking over, or, there's some creepy guy coming out of the wall behind me. I mean, I've seen too many movies.
Slender Man,
there are a lot of, apparently, cameras in ladies' bathrooms. You think there are in men's, too?
I'm sure there are.
You can't possibly be referencing a certain St. Louis restaurant from several years ago. Yeah, which I'm not going to name, but... Yeah, go ahead. And then I just happened to think of two scenes that do take place technically in bathrooms that were really, one caused the audience to applaud. This is a movie. Jurassic Park, the first one. The lawyer goes running into the bathroom to hide as T-Rex goes through, and of course T-Rex knocks over the rest of the stalls, and he's right there and goes,
I thought that was a porta potty.
No, it was a full bathroom. He disassembled that building to get to that man.
Yes.
Yeah. She was a hungry T-Rex.
Very hungry T-Rex. And the audience all applaud because the lawyer got killed.
Yeah.
One other one. I'm probably the only one around this table who's seen this. Is from a TV show. In America, they call it MI5. In England, it's called... In Canada, they call it by the proper name, which is Spooks. I know in America they changed it because that sounds like a racist term. But anybody who's in the intelligence field knows a spook is a spy. So in this scene, in this storyline, the character, who I can't think of the actor's name, but I know everybody in here has seen him. He was in both Jack Reacher, the black detective, and in Interstellar, he played the principal of a school. Anyway,
I can't help you with that.
I know it's David's his first name. I can't think of his last name. How to pronounce it? But anyway, his character was put on a mission with another character to intercept somebody who was going to sell nuclear stuff to North Korea. Instead, what turned out to be from interception turns into, he suddenly has a change in orders, and they have to assassinate this guy. And it's a wet work. It's not one of those, I'm going to make a long sniper rifle. He actually has to inject the guy while he's asleep. And the bathroom scene afterwards, at the end, when he returns home, is so significant. You'd have to see the story, see the episode to understand the significance. But it is very significant and proof that he's still able to be human after all this.
I'll point out at first that, this is like a cultural thing. What's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Actually, in Japanese culture, bathrooms are a very frightening place to be. It's kids are told horror stories when they're little about monsters that live in toilets or attack you while you're in bathrooms, mostly to keep them safe when they're using public restrooms. They tell about the boogeyman who comes up out of the toilet and flushes you down. But these are all, we're talking about instances of things that have bathrooms in them. What the topic we're really kind of trying to attack today is why don't we include mundane stuff, not like horror bathrooms or interrogation bathrooms or, I don't know, shower scenes or classic MI6 humanizing scenes in bathrooms. Humanizing scenes can take place anywhere, and you choose the bathroom strategically because, there's a mirror there or whatever. The question is, why don't we see people put in their contacts? Why don't we include these little humanizing notes in our fictions? Sometimes is because we're moving too fast. We don't want to drag the narrative down. It's not stuff people want to read. Those kind of things. So let's kind of steer that direction, because we could list our favorite bathroom scenes all day.
Yeah. As I said before, I haven't think about one.
There is a very good reason to use ordinary things like bathrooms, which I can't quite get off of just yet, such as in comedy. In the Full Monty, for example, a key scene is when one of the Full Monty dancers eventually, his wife, goes into the men's restroom and stands up. And this is a plot point that he just can't get around. And so it precipitates the entire rest of the story, and it's a great comic device, too.
Okay, I was going to throw out a few of my favorite, because you're right, you can use all of these for comedy. I mean, pick any comedy, you'll see them do a bathroom joke or something crazy like that. But some of my favorites are obviously the biggest one that Hollywood's actually getting better about, which is reloading.
Yes.
There are guns, there are bullets, there are only so many bullets in a gun. That's okay. We'll just keep pulling the trigger and things will keep coming out.
Yeah, it gets replicated as they shoot. Yeah.
Exactly. It's fun stuff. The other one that I also really like is no one ever really fills up their tank with gas unless the car's going to explode.
Right.
Or, there's some
Or the station's going to explode.
Yeah, the station's going to explode. Unless the station's going to go boom, nobody fills up their car with gas.
Or they're about to run out of gas.
I should say Pitch Perfect, they do kind of start to fill up with gas, but then they don't. But then I would also throw out, sometimes you will see people pay. They will leave money. But how often is it that you see them hand over their credit card, get it back, and actually sign?
Right.
You'll see them order. Hollywood loves to show, and people love to have people ordering because it's dynamic talking time. But nobody really pays the bill. There's never an argument about it. No one's ever how much do we leave in tip or any of that kind of stuff. So
or my treat. No, my treat.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
So those are some of the mundane things that you should probably leave out that I think are hilarious.
I was just thinking the whole reloading thing. A lot of times, if you think about ordinary life, if you think about the problems of ordinary life, that can become your plot points. As in, I was reading a story, and the character constantly on her mind is, I have 6 bullets left, I only have 1 spare clip, I have 3 bad guys and 4 bullets. This isn't going to work. I need some way other than shooting them to take out these guys. I mean, if you think about the mundane details, it actually can build in.
I was going to...
Well, do you want to introduce yourself?
No, you will never know who I am. Hi, I'm co-host Kathleen Kayembe. I'm a paranormal romance author under the pen name Kaseka and Vita, and I have things to say. So back to that. Brad, all the things that you were mentioning are things that happen as a plot point. When we're writing things, we tend to need what we write to do double duty, not just as putting the scene forward, but we need it to build character or move the story itself forward. And so that's one note about those little mundane details, why we sometimes leave them out or why we put them in. Because if you, as Melanie said, if you have 4 assailants and only 3 bullets
Actually,
left.
it was 4 bullets and 3 people, but this writer is realistic enough to know that you can't really kill someone, guaranteed to kill someone with 1 shot.
Okay, so I'm changing it then. With 3 bullets and 4 people, that becomes a plot point, because you can't take out all of those people, even if you're an expert marksman. Unless you somehow figure out a way to line them up and then hope the bullet goes through. But that's character building, too.
Yeah, we were talking about things that weren't necessarily being used to build character. Because we dealt with that first on terms of, like, you know, somebody looking in the mirror and shaving, or, you know, people waking up to their alarm clocks. And, you know, things like that.
Yeah, in Strunk and White, I think, they say omit unnecessary words, omit needless words. That's what it was. And we're always told by authors to leave out the boring parts. And a lot of the details, unless you use them in a way that builds character or pushes the story forward, are boring parts.
They're boring parts, and they're the parts that we need to take out for pacing reasons.
Yeah.
Because if you include every single moment of a guy's life, then people are reading and thinking, I have my own life I should be living right now. Why am I watching this guy eat breakfast and pick out his shirt for the day and start his car and drive and continue driving and turn left and then get to his work and then park? And, you know, you're bored listening to me describe it. Imagine reading a book with that. There's the reason why there's the stand and then there's the stand, you know. The abridged version is the edited version that needs to be out there because it took out all of the extraneous, pointless putzing about people's houses forever.
It builds suspense.
Sure it does. Sorry. It builds suspense so much that...
See, this is why I can't be a pantser, because it turns out really boring, because, like, where's the pacing?
Yeah, he pantses.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something real fast, and then I'm going to turn it over to her. I wasn't sure if you still had your...
Then we'll do popcorning.
Okay, harder than you. And that is, there's a phrase in the military and in the police, basically, they'll tell you, they go hours and hours and days without anything to do for about a minute's worth of panic. And that's basically what you're trying to chop out those hours so you can get to the minute's worth of panic in your story.
One argument for using those mundane details, those mundane things, are if you've heard of the hero's journey, story arc. At the beginning, you need to have your normal world, your mundane, the place where the hero begins, so that when the hero leaves to do their awesome journeying, they have a place that they're leaving. So, at the beginning of Lord of the Rings, which is quite dramatic, has a lot of things that it deals with. You start in the Shire, and the Shire is like little town Boringsville, because nothing ever happens there, and that's the point of the Shire. It is where all the same things happen to the same people and whatever.
No one ever goes on adventures.
Yeah, adventures, you will be ostracized for adventuring. Like, no good hobbit would do that.
They'll declare you dead and auction off your stuff.
But see, that's important. That's where our hero starts, and so the entire journey that they both go on, really, is hugely character building, because when you start from such a small-minded character and then show them the world, you have a very dramatic story. The other thing I was going to say was about building suspense. Mundane details are great if you are building suspense. If you've ever seen the first Scream film, where there's a blonde Drew Barrymore in her house, and you know the killer is in her house, and she's just making popcorn, stuff is popping, she can't hear crap. You're like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? What is she doing? She needs to get out, she's going to die. Because every mundane thing she does brings her closer to her death. You're sure of it. And that's hugely suspenseful.
And I think a key point is relatability in what you were saying, and also in characters. Take, for example, Elvis Cole, Robert Crace sleuth. He drinks coffee out of a Spider-Man mug. And that is a wonderfully telling detail. Tells a lot about him, but so economical, so quick. So, just right there. And Sherlock Holmes, who smokes a pipe. Now, what is more boring than watching somebody smoke a pipe? Nothing. But he smokes a briar pipe, and it is for his cogitation. We know that he's thinking when he's smoking that pipe. So these very small but very telling details are taking something from the ordinary, making the character relatable, and also telling us something very important about the character.
And I'm going to just quickly dovetail it because you just hit everything I was going to use as an example. I'm going to give out another example, and that most people have seen it. I'm using a movie that's... I do movies because I know more people see movies, and I know they've read the books I've read. And that is Pulp Fiction. Mm-hmm. When John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson are going out to commit an assassination, what are they talking about? They're not talking about they're talking about hamburgers. They're not talking about it. That tells you
before.
Yes,
I'm having deja vu.
That's why I want to throw it out there again. We've talked about it before, but it's a perfect example of where the mundane highlights the highlights the plot.
Well, the mundane will always be used, especially in horror, because you can use the mundane to settle the scene and then, ramp up the tension. So the mundane is always going to be used for that. However, as you were saying with the coffee cup, great detail. We don't see him making the coffee. We don't see him pouring the water in the pot, pouring the grounds in, getting it all good. We don't see him putting the little K-cup into the Keurig and hitting the button. Nobody does that. He gets the nice warm cup of coffee, sits down, begins to think and drink. Same thing with smoking. It's wonderful and stuff, it's a great literary device, but what it really is good for is, all those actions that you get to put into the dialogue. So as he packs his pipe, as he smokes his pipe, as he releases the smoke out, dialogue kind of interjects in between that. Mundane is great for that. But I think the point is that with Sherlock, I love the fact that he plays the violin. Mm-hmm. However, I don't really need to see him, using the rosin on the bow or tuning the instrument unless it's the end of the tuning where he's just getting it perfect and right before he starts to play. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about when we say, avoid some of the mundane.
Yes.
Well, I think this is we're starting to sound a little bit like we were asking, why does no one write these things? I really, really want to see a guy picking his nose in the corner of the room, that kind of thing. But we're not. What we're saying is that those things aren't included for
Kenny, flick it. No,
for many reasons. That being one of them. One of the reasons you don't include that. But the point is including those things does have some value. You just have to find a way to include them economically.
The right detail at the right time is a perfect mix.
And answering questions about your world you're writing, specifically if you're writing a sci-fi world or a fantasy world. We brought up the Enterprise. You never see anyone use the bathroom on the Enterprise. There is one on the blueprints, but you never see them use it.
Just once, can I get Picard coming out of the bathroom with the flush in the back?
you did have Mount Reynolds in Firefly.
But the point I'm making is then people ask questions like, this is a future fantasy world. Mm-hmm. Do they pee in the future?
Or what do the bathrooms look like?
Yeah, it's like, what do the bathrooms look like?
The three shells.
A good question. Oh boy, a good question that I wanted to use on it is in the Harry Potter world. We know what the real world is like in Harry Potter because it's the present. But in magical world, how does Harry Potter pay for things? Because Harry has lived his entire life impoverished in the real world, and now he's in the magic world, and he's expected to get all this stuff to go to school. Well, they write that off as, his parents died, so he's inherited a grand fortune. That makes perfect sense. People die, you get an inheritance, but instead of just saying, he gets a big fortune, we then get a chance to go into the bank, and we get to see what it's like in a magic bank, and there's magic trolls there's goblins that run the bank, and you have to take a mine cart, and there's dragons down there, and it becomes a world-building exercise just going to get him some money so he can buy school books. Now, it would be easy to say, buying school books is a boring thing. getting money out of the bank is a boring thing. We'll just say that magically he has money, and Hagrid shows up, and he's like, there's all this money, and this is your money, Harry. Congratulations with it. Go buy your school books.
He gets a credit card.
Yeah, we used a bad credit card.
Yeah, how come there's no magic credit card?
But they don't have technology, that's why.
That's why it's magic.
They still use gold bars. And more to the money, what does Harry Potter do now that he has all this fortune? It would be really easy to write off, he's got a huge fortune now. Of course, now he never has to worry about buying anything. Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing he does with his fortune is he's sitting on the Hogwarts Express across from Ron Weasley, who has nothing. He's eating his sandwich that his mom packed him from home, and the first thing he does is buy everything on the snack trolley, because he wants to share it with his friend. Now we've learned something about Harry. With the exact same sort of mundane detail, we're following this whole money train, and how do you spend money? That's stupid stuff that no one cares about. But we've learned about Harry, and also included a little world building at the same time. That's a good use of mundane detail.
Beautiful.
Amen. Can you drop the mic, please? Awesome. I was going to give an example of a mundane detail being used to show character in a very sinister way. Mm. I have resumed watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I am in season 2, and Angel has become Angelus. Basically, a good vampire has become hell on wheels for everyone. Like, all of the good that was in him is gone. So, Angel doesn't smoke. He loves Buffy. He's always a little sad, and he loathes the vampires that he created. Like, he feels very guilty about Drusilla creating a mad vampire, and he avoids them and he fights against them, trying to protect Buffy. When he turns, one of the first things he does is he shows up at Spike and Drusilla's place. And something's really weird about how he's acting. Like, he's swaggering in a way he never does. And the part that was brilliant, though, was he picked up a match and he dragged it along the table and came up with it lit and lit a cigarette. Angel doesn't smoke. Mm-hmm. Angel hates these people. What the hell happened to this character? Because he's doing nothing that he would ever do. That was the most sinister, oh, holy crap, he really is gone moment for me. Because there's a moment afterwards that proves that Angel, as we knew him, is dead. But it was that smoking moment where he pulled up the match and just casually lit a cigarette with his back to two people who were trying to kill him that I was like, oh god. Oh god, he's gone. I don't know what to do with this person, but he sings like Satan. I'm sorry, I'm not explaining it nearly as well as the effect it had, like, all the way through my body. He was different, and it was a little detail, but it said volumes.
I just want to say, Kathleen, that I have always inspired how much you feel everything that you partake in. You feel every TV show and book and anything that you love, you just feel it with every single ounce of you. I think that's pretty special, actually.
I think Brad has an idea that's on this topic, but just to let you know, I'm putting forward my vote to change gears and talk about things that, let's call it the convenience. For the convenience, a plot issue. Oh. But let's talk, I have something about that if Brad wants to.
Actually, I was going to jump in on the fact that as a steampunk author,
yeah.
I kind of live in the mundane. Because, there really is no need to describe the fact that the guy is wearing leather and brass, but that's kind of the whole point of steampunk, is to describe the fact that the guy is wearing leather and brass.
If you don't, you lose the genre.
Exactly. So, my genre specifically is kind of, honed in those little details. I can't just have a coffee cup. I have an automaton serve them tea. Mm-hmm. Fun stuff like that. So, I do totally see the point of the mundane. But as we've been saying, I think there's a time for the mundane when you can highlight it and use it for effect, and then there are times when you really just need to cut out the fact that they just went to the bathroom.
And you have to meet expectations.
You do.
Mine's going to be really short. Sometimes, though, another way to use the mundane is as symbolism. If fire is representing something in your stories, starting off having somebody talk around a campfire.
What the hell was that post in Shane?
Yeah, well, no problem.
There's the fence post in
There's
Shane.
a fence post in Shane.
Oh.
It's a
Yes.
huge metaphor throughout the book, and I still don't get it.
You've got the proposed change of gears. Go ahead, though.
Oh,
Is it
mine
the
is
old
a change.
Okay,
I'm
so
gonna-
my issue is part of this is sloppy storytelling, and then part of it is unavoidable. But the sloppy storytelling is, let's use a sci-fi example in Star Trek, just because it's an easy target. Time travel is incredibly easy when it's necessary to be easy for the plot. Hence Star Trek 4. Time travel is difficult when it is necessary for the plot. Hence Voyager.
Yeah.
But then there's another issue, which I think is more common and can be used, but it tends to be overused, called the convenient fill in the blank. So the convenient kid is probably the most common version of this.
Yeah.
Someone has care of the child, so the child, or needing to take care of the child, can be a major plot point. It is usually not their child, because then the kid is no longer convenient, because you have to explain why the kid isn't there all the time. But if they're just babysitting, well, when the kid isn't needed for the plot, they can go back to their parents.
I am so glad you brought up the convenient child. Because one of the other reasons we were going to talk about this today was the lack of day jobs, family ties, and kids and protagonists. The convenient child in urban fantasy is generally like the strong female character, narrator, heroine's, sister's kid. Or it's a kid that she's taking care of for the duration of the plot points that this kid is going to get her stuck in.
To prove that she's maternal and nurturing at the same time that she's badass and masculine.
Yes,
Exactly.
so her potential love interest, subplot threads, those people will see, oh, I can see myself starting a life with this woman because she can take care of children. But thankfully, she's still single or dating me, which means we don't have that child, and we can still have kissy faces in the corner when the child's not.
Jurassic World.
I have to say, I'm guilty of this in my current project, and I'm sorry, there's no way around it for the plot.
Explain why, though, because that's really important.
Okay.
That's why we're going into this.
So, the issue for me, if the story arc continues, I actually fully intend for my main character to have kids. But my main character is 18 years old, and one of her main motivations for things is protecting her nieces. So, she kind of needs nieces. And, she's can't be her kids.
You're allowed to use a trope. Go for it.
Yeah, use your favorite tropes.
Yeah.
That's all stories are, is your collection
Like
of
I said-
favorite tropes in a certain order.
Yeah.
What I was going to throw out is, kind of on the whole convenient kid thing is pretty much, I think sometimes it can truly destroy a story, and I'm going to throw out Ultraviolet, and I'm going to throw out Elektra, and there's probably a dozen more that are on the tip of my tongue right now. But I think if the kid is just sticking out there for no apparent reason, other than to give that maternal feeling or do any of that kind of stuff, I think it can really kill a franchise. I don't think necessarily kids have to have a kid in the movie to go see the movie.
Yeah.
I think it helps, but to be honest, I think they would have gone and seen Ultraviolet if it had just been Mila running around as a vampire kicking all butt without the kid,
I think that was, I don't know. That was a really bad movie.
Yeah, no comment.
Well, I think that goes to marketing, like, kids aren't going to read comic books unless there's a little Jimmy Olsen following.
Oh my gosh,
Exactly.
can
The
I
whole
talk about that?
sidekick thing.
Yeah,
Yes, please, can we talk
The
about
thing
sidekicks?
is,
Oh, gosh.
most
Bucky.
of us, I am used to as a minority trifecta, basically. That's what I am. I'm a minority trifecta. I'm used to watching a film or reading a book and not seeing myself in most of the characters, seeing pieces of me maybe in a couple. I still watch and read a lot. So there are many people who are used to not seeing themselves in stories and don't require that from stories because otherwise they'd never get stories. So I think having the whole it's useless. Don't do it. It's ruining your story. Jen, you were going to say something.
No, yeah, go around the circle.
I think one of the most obvious things that Mundane cut out is something so obvious that we haven't even talked about it. The most obvious one is travel. It takes no time at all to get from Washington, D.C. to Florida or to Paris or wherever, when, of course, we know that these flights take 8.5 hours, in fact. Cut them out because, of course, they would be boring to put in.
Unless there's a plane accident.
Well, if it's the plot, it's fine. But what I'm trying to say here is that we get so used to not having these mundane things involved that we expect them not to be involved. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a good thing.
Jen?
I was going to... I'm going to make way for Brad's point, since he wants to complain about sidekicks.
I was going to do that this time. Okay, go.
Well, now you're gonna. I told you to.
Exactly.
I wanted to point out a kind of a fad in mid 90s, early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, 2000s children's media. I don't know who decided that little kids don't like to watch adults do things, but they are delusional.
Yeah.
I was a little girl once, and I would play with My Little Ponies, but I would also play Star Wars. There were no little kids in Star Wars. Do you know who I pretended to be every time we played? Han Solo. Because he was the most badass, and he got to shoot a gun, and he had a giant dog man that followed him around, and I wanted to be Han Solo when I grew up. I did not want to be the Junior Ghostbusters when I grew up.
No.
And you know why? It's because the Junior Ghostbusters were my age.
Didn't you want to be Princess Leia?
I did not want to be Princess Leia.
Just because she's a girl?
No, Princess Leia wasn't nearly as interesting as Han.
Okay.
She did not have a laser sword.
You did Han. He had a dog man.
He used one, though. He got to use it in
You
two.
got to use it
Yes.
once. The point...
Or I should say 5.
The point I'm making, and it's a point that I've heard other people make too, is that when you're looking at little kids, thinking that little kids can't get into something without little kids in it, to show them that you can also enjoy this, because look, someone you know is inside. No, it's, little kids, when you're seeing a character that's your age, all you're thinking is, oh, I'm not them. They're my age and I'm not like they are. But their parents or whatever that are spies or spaceship captains or whatever, ooh, I can grow up to be them.
You just
I
hit
want
it right
to
on
be
the money,
them.
and that's exactly what it's about. The kid can grow up and become that. Whereas if it's the kid who's already doing that, well, then they just have a better life than you.
It's all about fantasy.
Spy Kids? Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about living the fantasy, and it's as a kid, you want to grow up. Your fantasy is to be like your mom or your dad or your grandma or whoever you admire, and if you admire Batman, you want to grow up and be Batman. If you can be Batman, be Batman.
Can we talk about Batman?
We can talk about Batman.
All right.
You gonna talk about what a wicked guy he is for putting all these children in danger?
Exactly. That's exactly it. Where is Child Protective Services in Gotham? Come on, man. All right. Now, so real quick, as we kind of alluded to, the whole sidekick madness of the 40s and 50s is essentially that they decided that the World War II comics were too adult and too graphic for kids to really want to get into. So
or their
every
parents were want to
superhero got a sidekick.
Nah.
Captain America got Bucky. Robin came to Batman. Speedy came to the Flash. You're right. Sorry, Speedy, because Kid Flash is even worse name.
Yes.
Aqualad. Every single one got one. And if you notice that by the 60s and especially in the 70s, they all go away. And then in the 90s, we got nostalgic for them. We brought them all back and ruined their lives.
They were darker and
Exactly.
tortured, and now they were on the bad side.
Winter Soldier Bucky references here.
I'm going to turn this over to you, Kathleen, but I'm going to say also, too, during that same time frame, just to add to it, this is also, to borrow from Arrow, this is when they had the punching...
Kapow!
The kapows, you had the...
The boxing glove on top of the
glove arrow and all that
I
stuff.
still like the boxing glove arrow.
I do too, but that's when this all came out. Go ahead.
Well, I think we're getting low on time, so I wanted to go from kids to day jobs. I am writing a story with witches, and there's a character in it who has a day job. Mm-hmm. She's supposed to be teaching art to elementary school kids during the day. That was highly inconvenient when she got possessed by a demon and was completely MIA. So when that happened, I was like, oh no, okay, so she can't go to work, so someone's going to have to call them about that. She's going to have to be reported missing. Mm-hmm. Like all these little things, police are probably going to have to be involved, so the other character is now going to have to take time out of her, hell on wheels trying to get through it, everything, to report this character, talk to the police, go looking, like all these things.
Big pain in the butt.
I know.
It is.
Going missing is hugely inconvenient for everyone around you.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I was like, okay, so what am I going to do when she's not possessed anymore? She's still got to go to work. But there's not space for her to go to work in the plot. Like, that'll be highly inconvenient. What do you do with an inconvenient day job? I think that's why so many paranormal investigation stories, the main character's job is a PI or a police officer, or
somebody doesn't have to go to work every day,
or is conveniently wealthy.
Or they're a writer who's in a dry spot and just hasn't been able to write, so they're technically not working even though they're getting paid.
Or in the case of Mercy Thompson, she does have a day job, but she's the owner of her garage, so she can kind of set her own hours. And I think that's much more convenient for your protagonist because they're going to have to go through a bunch of stuff, especially if it's fantasy or sci-fi.
Make them professional wizards.
Well, so I write YA. It's Iron Horseman is technically kind of set at Eton College, and I like it because I get to use Eton, and obviously the high school trope is huge, that a kid has to go to school every day, same thing as kind of the day job effect. However, I always then have to figure out a way to pluck him out of Eton. Now, I will say conveniently in the first one, Queen Victoria gives him his excuse so that Eton will allow him back in and not, and will excuse all those absences. So, fun stuff like that. But it is kind of a thing. Every book I have to figure out how I'm going to pluck him out of Eton and get him on the road, or in the sky, actually, on his journey. And I think that's honestly why the Journey's stories are so prevalent, is because you can rip somebody out of that day job. But I would love to see somebody who doesn't hate their job, who actually goes to job, and it's not like hell on earth where the soul sucking is just taking every minute of their life, or the opposite, where they have the greatest job in the world and this is just roses every day and rainbows show up as they hit work. I would love just the guy who's sitting in some bad meeting trying to figure out just what's going on Facebook during that or something. It's like the true mundane would be kind of more interesting, I think, at this point than the, Joe versus the volcano kind of effect.
You put a shark in it.
We get a lot of misconceptions because of fiction, because writers will cut out the mundane items. Oh. You were talking about somebody that has a full-time job is a private investigator?
Yeah.
Not so. I know one who has 3 jobs. He is a private investigator, most of that work being done at night, hardly ever anything in the daytime, and he works at a gym because he wants to stay fit and all, and he works at Best Buy. He has 3 jobs. Being a private investigator is seldom a full-time job for anybody.
Yes.
I was just thinking about that, but Charlene Harris, a series that she wrote before Suki Stackhouse, it was Shakespeare was in all the titles. But the main character started out as a cleaning woman, and then as things progressed, she actually became a private investigator, or at least she married a private investigator, so she was working with him. But the point was, one of her clients, she was actually undercover working in the client's gym, and then after the job was over, someone in the gym called her back in to work there again, not knowing that she had just been there undercover. She went and worked there. Well, 2 things. One, she could actually use the money, even though it was a low-paying job, which should tell you something. And number 2, she wanted to stay good with the owner. But the point is, she actually still had a couple of cleaning clients, too.
Well, I'm going to throw out my favorite of all, which is the fantasy novel. How often does your fantasy novel star a character who has a job? Yes, Aragorn is officially a ranger, which is defined as guy who wanders around.
Yeah, is that a job or a way of life?
I don't know.
Yes.
Here's my other favorite in all. So, okay, we're going to go on this adventure. It's going to be weeks long. I have this tiny little money pouch that magically carries all the gold that I'm going to need for this entire journey.
10,000 gold coins.
Yeah, like,
That's heavy.
Yeah, I know.
Apparently they all had bags of holding. But the reality is that in fantasy novels, we get so lax on all of this because we forget about the fact that people have jobs, people need to eat every day. So, camping out is nice, but were they actually able to hunt or fish or do anything like that during the day? Do they stop at inns, or they're just inns conveniently located, every day's travel? Mm-hmm. All this kind of stuff just gets chucked to the wind because we love the idea of somebody working for the king. It's like, well, then they barely leave the castle. Yeah, it's funny. So, fantasy novels really need to step that up.
Okay. Brad, and anyone who writes fantasy novels, I have a recommendation for you. It is amazing. It is called The Tough Guide to Fantasyland. I believe it's by Diana Wynne Jones. And basically, It is a travel guide for Fantasyland, and it calls out all the tropes.
Yeah.
It is hilarious.
It is funny.
And it is definitely worth reading. Like stew. They always eat stew.
Yes.
Like, there is nothing else that you can make to eat when you are traveling. Just stew.
Everything is boiled.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Because there's fire.
Yeah. Fire, water, and that'll cook anything.
And I think it talks about the conveniently placed inns, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And as I say, most of your Western fantasies.
Oh, another good one.
Yeah.
Notice how he said fantasy.
I said Western style fantasy. I'll still keep with your stuff.
Okay.
I don't mean the Wild West fantasy, which that's a whole nother topic.
I was going to say, there's always that full bottle of whiskey waiting for somebody.
Oh, God, yes. And always the prostitute with the heart of gold. But we won't go down that road. I'm talking about the European style fantasy, like Tolkien. And there's other ones after
King
that.
Arthur.
No, I wasn't going there.
Oh, okay.
He's real.
Medieval times, which is what this kind of sort of based on. Remember, most people didn't travel.
Yeah.
You 20 miles outside of your town was a long distance.
Very long.
That was that once-in-a-lifetime journey.
Exactly.
To that town right down the road.
Right. So, what I'm going to say is, in fantasy, every character should have some kind of job. I'm sorry, I thought you had your thing. I thought you had your R up. No.
Well, just modern-wise, again, there's the whole... It's so easy, you just make it their job to solve the mystery. But if you're not going to do that, are they going to make them independently wealthy, have family support? I remember... Well, David wasn't there, but I was playing a role-playing game with people that we were more or less playing to be ourselves with superpowers. Mm-hmm. And government officials ask the people to actually be part of a special team. And the first question the team members ask, so, how much does this pay? That was the very first question.
Yeah, the altruistic, priest or whatever in fantasy. You gotta love that one.
Well, they're supported by the church.
Well, look at Batman. Billionaire by day, crime fighter by night. How many billionaires have done that? None.
That we know of.
Well, there's so
Tony
many...
Stark.
No, in real life.
In real life.
There's
that Batman guy, he was pretty cool. He was probably the closest we're going to get, and he was just a doctor.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many excuses that people give for why you can't have a day job, and you always have the hero be either in a fantasy novel he's the pig slopper that is the bottom rung, and if he leaves his job, no one cares. They'll just replace him with another orphan. That's why we get all these troped heroes, and by kind of addressing these mundane things that we've been discussing in this session. By discussing these things, we're thinking of ways to make our characters uniquer. Not defaulting, it'd be easier if my protagonist wasn't a teacher. Then we wouldn't have to worry about her going missing because no one would notice. But by including that detail, you now have a lot more story to tell. And that story is about a character who has a lot more has more dimension than the one, the shut-in that doesn't know anyone.
Well, I have this idea, and again, it was dealing with the subplot, and I don't know if it'll fit in the story, because it's such a great antidote for the, subplot, because it comes from the mundane. My main character's family business is a delivery company, and my main character, because she can do it, magically freezes all the cold packs for the delivery business. So when she goes, he has to use electricity to do that. So his electricity use spikes a lot. she didn't quite realize how much money she was saving for the delivery business. And there are consequences to that, and that would make a very entertaining subplot. I'm imagining SWAT guys bursting in looking for marijuana grow lights.
So that'd be fun.
Yeah, it would be. But again, will that fit into the story?
Well, you can see if it can do double duty somewhere.
Yeah.
Will that fit into the story is an amazing thing that you just said. Because I think one of the things that we started talking about, at least when I came in, was we're supposed to leave out the boring parts, but including the right details can ratchet up tension, help you learn about the character, and, help with pacing too. So I think one of the key things here is not, that we've been saying, is not to leave out all the mundane. It's to include the right amount of the mundane, because if you use it right, you can use it to build character, to complicate your plot line. Like, when Jen brought up my character, the other problem with her being reported to the police is that if a police officer sees her, they're going to know to be looking for her. And if they take her in because she's missing, what does she say? And it's going to have to be at the exact wrong moment, because that's how stories work. So letting real details enrich your story and complicate it is really good to do, but you have to make sure that it doesn't overpower the main plot line. It's a balance.
Well, as Fedora was saying, because I completely agree with what you just said right there, but as we said earlier about Elmore Leonard, making certain that you take out the parts that people don't want to read. Putting in those little mundane details is exactly the kind of thing people do want to read at the right moment. Not at the right moment, nobody wants to read it. And the last thing I would just throw out is, if you're going to do a bathroom scene, please have your character wash their hands.
Yes. It's craft. I mean, that's called the craft of it. Did you, Jen, have your...
Oh, no, it's fine.
Okay, then over here.
I want to take us all back to the bathroom, because one of my favorite scenes ever is in one of my favorite movies ever, A Fish Called Wanda.
Yes.
In this, Kevin Kline, who was at his absolute best in this role that he ever did, is sitting on the toilet. Michael Palin comes in. Kevin Kline flushes the toilet and stands up, and he's fully dressed. Michael Palin has a wonderful expression on his face, and this is a visual joke that is absolutely delightful, because it's certainly not what we expect.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go back to Brad for a second there with what you said, and then use that to close out. Using the mundane in your stories or not, that is part of the craft. It's a tool that takes time to learn and to master. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this out unless anyone else has anything. Kathleen, you got that look on your face? You got that look. I better not stop here.
Well, if you're going to do things like not give the protagonist a regular day job, not give them family that calls at inconvenient times, or that just shows up at their house because you live here and I was driving through on my way somewhere else, or if you're not going to give your protagonist kids, which is another full-time job that you do not get to drop. Kids are more time-consuming than a day job. If you're not going to have those details be part of your protagonist's life, you need to think about why, and be conscious of the reasons you're doing things as you're writing. Because eventually somebody's going to have a conversation like we are now, saying, why doesn't this character have a day job?
Where does that money come from?
Yeah.
Takes you out of the story when you start asking questions that aren't about the story.
Yes.
And you want your readers to be following along the path that you select when they're reading, not be taken out by the details that you have left out because they were inconvenient, or taken out of the story by the details you put in because they were convenient. So it's a balancing act, and it's part of the craft of writing, and you learn by doing so. Write lots this week.
Fill your canteens.
Yep. And with that, get to your writing, guys, and have a great week writing. Bye-bye. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Right Pack Radio would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their office. STL Books is a online bookstore specializing in new and used high-quality literature, children's books, and books written by or about St. Louis. Please visit them online at www.stlbooks.com or find their store on the Amazon.com website.